Good morning again. It is my privilege to welcome you to the second section of our event, our conference on elections, parliament, and nation building. It seemed to us that such a topic would be very timely and momentous in 2018, a year when many countries, especially Central and Eastern Europe, celebrate the centennial of their birth or rebirth as nation states. Romania is obviously one of those countries. 100 years of predicament, vibrant history, tragic history for many of those countries, but also 100 years of elections. And we thought that it would be momentous to reflect on how elections and the outcome of elections, that is national parliaments, helped building, make up the nations all over the world, but especially in Central Eastern Europe. We can start our reflection from afar. The first country ever to use universal suffrage for men only, it is true, was France in 1848. They kicked out the king, and they had to state that there is a new sovereign in France, and this sovereign is the nation. And they had to build up the nation, and almost spontaneously, the idea was that the way to engage in such a building process would be the suffrage. Call all adult males of France to come to the polls and establish a national assembly which will exert the sovereignty on behalf of the whole nation. It's not a surprise that ever since the constitutional doctrine of France was very much embraced in this country as well as in other countries of our region, states that the voter, the citizen voter, is first and foremost, to use Léon Dubuis language, un fonctionnaire national, the nation's civil servant. To vote, it's not a right, it's a duty, because by voting, even before electing a parliament and their own government, you confirm that the nation does exist. It may seem strange, but another country, out of a different philosophical and political outlook, Germany adopted universal suffrage also for men for exactly the same reasons. Chancellor Bismarck, who wasn't a liberal, as you well know, decided, after creating the German Empire in 1870-71, to introduce at the pan-German level universal suffrage. Different states in the new empire, Prussia, first and foremost, Bavaria, Baden, and so on and so forth, continue to use in electing their local governments the census based on property. But Bismarck designed a Reichstag, a national parliament, it is true, with no real powers. It was merely a consultative assembly that assisted and advised the Chancellor and the Emperor. But the Reichstag was elected by male universal suffrage. And this was how Bismarck envisaged the process of building a German nation, by using universal suffrage on the one hand and by creating the national security system, the pension system, which we still run in this country and in many other countries, including France, is designed by Bismarck as a tool of nation building. Before the idea of assisting persons in their old age, the goal of creating a national service of retired persons and to assist them in having a decent life was to create a national pan-German institution. After the Great War, all countries in the region, Romania, Poland, Hungary, used for a time, before the famous process of breakdown of democracy in the 30s, universal suffrage in order to create a unified nation. Romanian constitutionalists of the 20s usually quote Caredium Albert in stating that the voter is a civil servant. It's not that important that the voter creates a National Assembly and the government. What is at stake in the electoral process is that the voter, and voting was compulsory in this country and in many other countries in between the two wars, the main function of the voter was to build the nation by showing up, by turning out to vote. The question that we may, in retrospect, address to this process, foundational process of introducing universal suffrage, not for the sake of equality, but for the sake of building the nation state, is what kind of nations are produced by suffrage. As we know that suffrage is not the only tool to imagine a nation. Ideology, history, collective memory, and so on and so forth are other instruments of nation building. But suffrage was the foremost, the paramount constitutional tool in forging new nations exactly 100 years ago. The question, therefore, and I close my opening argument here, is therefore what kind of nations? What does the suffrage do in terms of nation building? Is the electoral process a kind of selfie? The nation sends back to itself an image of its cleavages, alignments in citizens voting different parties that may be engaged in different public policies and may have separate or even competing anyway worldviews. These parties do build up a kind of portrait of the nation, that the nation looks at its parliament as in a mirror, to recognize itself, to know what the nation is all about in terms of values, orientations, alignments, hopes, and so on and so forth. It's not exactly true, even if some scholars do hold that indeed elections and parliaments are reflexive institutions. They express the nation. But the very word to express the nation is very significant. The first to introduce it in terms of elections, even before universal suffrage, was the famous English constitutionalist Walter Bagehot. When writing about the House of Commons, he listed in some order of importance the main functions he attributed, and mine it's 1867, a long time ago, before universal suffrage. And he allotted to the House different functions. The first function, he said, is obvious, is the elective function. The Parliament, the House, elects a government. But the second function of the House, states Bagehot, is the expressive function. The Parliament should express what the British people are. And the Britons, looking at their Parliament, can somehow recognize themselves. But mind, so used by Bagehot, the function of a Parliament elected by universal and hopefully equal suffrage to express the nation that voted for it, it's not a photographic function. The Parliament is not a selfie, as I've already emphasized. The relation is aesthetic. The Parliament is an artistic portrait of the nation, is a representation of the nation. That's why, for instance, the Romanian Constitution cogently says that the first function of the Parliament is the representative one, and then comes the legislative one. Sometimes in our day-to-day conversation, when some of us, not myself, but some of us tend to say, the Parliament has to keep on legislating, and the Parliament doesn't need to go into any other business that's drafting legislation, as if a Parliament is a manufacturer of laws and nothing else. It's an engine that produces legislation, nothing more, nothing different. It's not true. That's what the Parliament does in a second time. In the first stage, the Parliament represents, expresses the nation. You look at the Parliament and you know what the nation is. You don't look at the President, you don't look at the Supreme Court of a country to know something about that country. What's at stake in society, in the economy, in terms of values, shared or values that divide people. You look at the Parliament, at the parliamentary debates in Romania, in the US, in France, in Germany, in Poland, in India, everywhere, and you understand somehow what that particular nation believes or stands for. And you understand it in a hermeneutical way, because you are before something that is the closest you may get to an aesthetic production of the nation. So political representation, as famous Dutch scholar Ankersmit put it a while ago, political representation is an aesthetic endeavor. Thus said, it is my pleasure and obviously privilege to recognize here in our conference the presence of Professor Tudor Toader, who is not only the current Minister of Justice of Romania, which is probably in the long run, in academic terms, less important, but he is a professor of law at the University of Iași, the rector of that university. He is a member of the Venice Commission, and as you know, our event is a joint venture with the Venice Commission, and he was for a significant period of time a member of the Constitutional Court of Romania. And this is a quite personal opinion, it's a chance for this country that in this political season we are living, when there are going on fierce, sometimes unjust debates on our judicial system and in general on our legal system, it is a chance for this country to have at the helm of the Ministry of Justice such a personality, a legal scholar of a solid renown and sound academic work. So it's my privilege and pleasure to ask Professor Toade to address. He would talk later on in the afternoon, but now